Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at the feature race at Monmouth Park on Saturday. Race 9 is the Goldwood Stakes, going 5.5 furlongs on the turf course for fillies and mares. And Craig, when we throw up the field for this race, you'll see there are 14 runners entered, but do note that 5 of them are entered as main track only runners. 10 through 14, Olivia Darling through Center Court Champ, are all MTO. So they'll only run if this race gets rained off the turf. And there is a possibility that could happen. There's rain predicted in this area in the Northeast for the next few days. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and handicap this race as if it's going to be run on the turf.
Yeah, the field size will probably actually be 9 if this race stays on the turf. And we'll see as we look at the pace projector that it does take that into account.
Yeah, let's check out that Timeform US pace projector for this Goldwood Stakes because there is quite a bit of speed signed on. The number 4, Sweet Temperament, who has actually never raced on the turf, is shown on the early lead. And Craig, I think her positioning clear of this field is a function of the fact that she's been competing in a lot of shorter races, going 5 furlongs on the dirt. So those horses are just going to, by nature, have higher pace figures than some of those that have been competing on the turf. But there are a few runners in this field that I think want to be on the front end.
Definitely. And it's always a question when a horse tries turf for the first time. You never know how they're going to handle it. If she does, she will probably be the leader. But as you mentioned, there are some others. There weren't quite enough to give it a fast pace flag, but I do think we'll get a good, solid, contested pace. The question is just how much does that really matter at 5.5 furlongs?
And if the pace does develop and is hot, it would help a horse like the number 5, Cant Buy Love, who does have that LP flag designating her as having the highest Timeform US late pace rating in the field. We'll get to her and some of the others drawn towards the outside in just a little bit, but let's take this field in post-position order as we go through the contenders, beginning with the number 1, Roselba, and we'll take a look at her last turf race, which came back in September of 2022, running against fellow New Jersey breds in the Pinot Grigio Stakes, and almost got the job done here, Craig. She actually won the 2021 edition of the Pinot Grigio, gets gunned down at the very end here by a runner to her outside. But even though she's run on dirt for the majority of her career, feels like this mare is probably better on the grass.
I would agree. She's run better speed figures. She does draw inside, but she's shown speed from there before, even at these shorter distances. So I would expect she's going to go. She's one of the horses that you probably were talking about when you said there were some other speed in here. I'm not really sure she's good enough to be a win contender, but I do expect her to be a pace presence.
Yeah, she gets a real class test here as she faces open company stakes horses. And if she does not possess the early speed to get to the front, she could be in trouble because she's not shown the attribute that she really likes to pass horses in her races. The number 2 is Hydra, and this one just feels like kind of an outsider in here, Craig. She has raced on turf before, but hasn't run in a turf race since 2021, so she's been campaigned primarily on dirt for most of her career, and especially recently. And going back to look at some of those prior turf races, they're just not quite good enough to make her a contender in here.
No, I would agree. And as you said, they were a long time ago. Her dirt form's obviously not that great. And not only were those races a long time ago, they were quite a few trainers ago as well. So she's not for me.
The number 3 is Trained to Artemis, who definitely is a player in this race. And let's take a look at her last victory, which came in the very one stakes at Pimlico back in the middle of May. And Paco Lopez kind of bumps his way out to get some room at the top of the stretch here, but he had the horse to finish off the race as she runs down a pace setter and wins here pretty convincingly as a 3-1 public choice. And Craig, this is a horse who has plenty of prior turf sprint experience. She's run speed figures that make her a major player in here. Just seems like a really good fit for this race. And even though she has tactical speed, she's not one that needs to be in front.
No, not at all. And she almost always shows up and runs a race. The one where she didn't run too well, even though it was a listed stakes like this one, I think it was a much better field at Keeneland. You can see the much bigger purse. So even that day, her speed figure only slipped a few points. So she's obviously a contender for me, and I expect her to run well.
Yeah, we should note this race in Timeform US has a preliminary race rating of just 108, so not the strongest listed stakes that you're ever going to see. So some horses that are coming out of those races with race ratings in the one teens, like Trained Artemis, I think you want to pay attention to, and this could be a slightly easier spot for her. Up next is that horse that was shown leading on the pace projector, the number 4, Sweet Temperament, and she'll be making her turf debut, as we said. She's run 11 prior times, has been in the exacta in 9 of those races. So she's got some decent form. Her speed figures are okay. And there is a smidgen of turf pedigree here since she is by Temple City, who's a decent turf influence, Craig. It just feels like she would have to improve on the turf to be effective here. And that could be a big ask.
I agree. I think her dirt form is fine. She's run some good speed figures, but you see the better ones came 4 and 5 back. So maybe she's tailing off just a little bit and they're looking for something different. This one didn't scream turf to me. Ships in from a much smaller circuit. It seems like a pretty ambitious spot to try turf for the first time.
Yeah, she's moving into the Jose Camejo barn, who has had a lot of success in recent seasons, though 2023 has been a slow one so far for this stable. So not sure how much of a trainer upgrade this is at this point in time. Moving on to the number 5, Cant Buy Love. We'll take a look at her last victory, which came at the end of last season in October at Laurel. And she wins going this same 5.5 furlong distance, coming through between horses with a nice late rally. And that's really the MO for this horse, Craig. She needs some pace ahead of her, but when she gets it, she can produce a pretty nice finish. And now she's second off the layoff after a pretty decent start to her season last time at Pimlico.
Yeah, she has a strong finishing kick. She hasn't had the best of setups as late, as we're going to see when we put her PPs up on the screen. Just a lot of blue fractions in there, which isn't ideal for a horse of her style. Even the race 3 back, she wound up close up because of that slow pace, but kind of took her out of her game. I expect an improved effort and another one who could definitely win here.
Yeah, as you said, she's got plenty of blue color-coded pace figures in her PP. She has a few synthetic tries in the past year or so. That's not the surface for her. So once you start to parse her form and just look for the races where she's had fair setups in turf sprints, she looks way more competitive than she might at first glance just based on speed figures. And I thought she ran really well off the layoff last time. That was another slow pace. She was wide every step of the way, only going 5 furlongs. That was a decent field. And I think she's one that does have a chance to take a step forward, second off the layoff for Mike Trombetta. The number 6 is Glitter Up. Let's take a look at her last race. And something that's notable about her is that she did recently win going the same 5.5 furlong distance over the Monmouth Park turf course. And she was pretty impressive doing so here, opening up off the far turn to win this race by 2.5 lengths, moving up into a tougher spot here. And not sure she's going to be able to get to the front as easily this time.
I think that's the big question for her because both of her wins in her career have come in wire-to-wire fashion. She has shown a little bit of possibility of coming from off the pace, but when a horse only has wins going wire-to-wire, that's how I tend to judge them. And I think this spot might just be a little bit too tough.
Yeah, she's faced a few of her main rivals in this spot in the past year or so. Mrs. Green a couple times, as well as Trained Artemis, has been beaten by those foes every single time. So she's going to have to step it up a little bit, but she did look good winning that race last time out. The number 7 is Mrs. Green, and she's making her first ever start in stakes company, Craig, but I'm not sure how much of a step up in class it really is because she's been facing some pretty nice optional claiming and allowance company on the Naira circuit. So moving to this race at Monmouth Park, it's probably more of a lateral move than a step up in class. She tried 7 furlongs off the layoff last time and may have just needed that race for fitness, switching into the Mark Casse barn.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that big speed figure last time. She comes out of a strong race. I believe the horse who won that race, she came back to win just yesterday, I think it was, with a nice effort at Canterbury on their big turf card night in a stakes race. So I think she's the real deal and a pretty strong contender in here. I think the 5.5 will be good for her. You can see some of her better races have come at that distance. The 7 furlongs was too long. She was probably taken out of her game drawing the inside post, went a little too fast. So I'm putting the line through that one, and I think she's got a big shot.
Yeah, she definitely handled the 5.5 furlongs at Saratoga last summer, and it seems like she's only improved since then. did really achieve top form for Linda Rice last year, and Linda Rice has just been on a roll in New York for the past year or so. So we'll see if she can have as much success for Mark Casse. This ownership group has consolidated their runners with Mark Casse, so that explains the trainer change, but definitely one of the ones to consider in this Goldwood. The number 8 is Tracy Ann's Legacy. We'll take a look at her last turf victory, which came in April at Tampa Bay Downs. And Craig, she was just beating slightly weaker company here, stepped up last time against a tougher field at Gulfstream, couldn't get the job done. I think she's just getting a class test, and we'll see if she's good enough.
True, that's what I would say about her. It seems like she's a little bit overmatched. She does draw well to the outside if the pace heats up. She has a running style that maybe she could pick up some pieces, but I think finding the winner's circle is going to prove to be a pretty tough hurdle.
And closing out the field for turf is the number 9, Self-Isolation. And she's another one that has spent most of her recent racing on the dirt, including this last start at Laurel, where she was a winner as the 2-1 second choice, going 6 furlongs. And feels like David Jacobson, Craig, his barn has just really come alive in the past couple of months or so. You see it in the performances of the horses. They're winning a lot more races, just improving their speed figures. And that's really indicative of what's happened to this mare in the past couple of months. Turning back in distance seems like it's really helped her on the dirt. And she is a horse that's handled turf in the past, going back to when she was competing as a California bred in Southern California. So it does stand to reason that maybe turf sprinting could be up her alley.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth taking a shot. She has the speed figure. She has the turf form. It's just one of those things she hasn't been able. She's only given one opportunity to sprint on turf, and that didn't go well, but it was a long time ago. I don't want to hold it against her. And she's yet another who seems like she fits in this spot and what's a good, deep, contentious race.
Well, let's throw up our top picks for this Goldwood. And Craig, we mostly have similar runners in the mix. You like the number 7, Mrs. Green, who I agree is a contender in this race. Like we said, making her stakes debut, but she's coming out of some pretty tough spots in New York.
Yeah, that was really tough, and I didn't like her trip at all, drawing the rail, going too far, fast pace. I just think she had a lot against her, and I thought she held on pretty admirably and just has a little bit of a class edge in here and a speed figure edge.
I'm going for that late runner, the number 5, Cant Buy Love, just hoping that she gets a bit more pace to run into in this race than she has in some of her recent starts. And it does feel like that's a possibility given the amount of speed signed on. So I've got her, as well as the number 9, Self-Isolation, in the mix, that runner who is switching back to the turf for the first time in a little while. So that's a look at the Goldwood Stakes at Monmouth on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.